You were taught that matter is the solid stuff of the universe, the thing everything else is built from: tables, stars, bodies, planets. Even when you learned that matter is made of atoms and atoms of smaller pieces, the idea stayed the same. Somewhere down there is stuff. Tiny, hard, definite things that make reality real. That idea feels obvious. It is also wrong. Not wrong in a technical footnote kind of way. Wrong at the level of what matter even is. And the reason this mistake survives is the same reason so many others do. It works well enough at human scale that you never feel the need to question it. Physics did question it, relentlessly. And the answer it found was not more solid than expected. It was less. The first crack appears the moment you ask a simple question. What does it mean for matter to be solid? You touch a table. Your hand stops. It feels firm, resistant. You conclude that matter is dense, packed, filled with something that blocks your hand. But that sensation is not produced by matter filling space. It is produced by forces preventing overlap. Your hand does not stop because it hits a wall of stuff. It stops because the electromagnetic interactions between atoms refuse to allow the configurations that would let your hand pass through. At no point do two pieces of matter ever actually touch. That alone should bother you. Matter feels solid, not because it is full, but because it is empty in a very specific, rule-enforced way. Now take the next step down. Atoms. You were shown diagrams. Little nuclei, little electrons, lots of space in between. You were told atoms are mostly empty space. That phrase sounds shocking until you hear it enough times that it becomes boring. But most people never finish the thought. If atoms are mostly empty space, and everything you touch is made of atoms, then solidity cannot come from matter being packed together. It has to come from something else. That something else is not matter. Electrons are not little balls orbiting nuclei through empty space. They do not have precise positions between measurements. They are described by wave functions, probability distributions, mathematical objects that tell you where interactions are, likely, not where a thing is. Matter at this level stops being a collection of objects and starts being a pattern of likelihoods. You don't have a thing sitting there. You have a rule for what can happen there. This is where the everyday picture finally breaks. You were taught that matter is something that occupies space and persists through time. Physics does not support that description. At the deepest level we can probe, matter is not a substance. It is a behavior. Particles are not tiny beads. They are excitations of fields, disturbances in something that exists everywhere, even where no particles are present. Remove the excitation, the field remains. The matter is gone. The structure is not. Matter is optional. The field is not. That should flip your intuition completely. You thought matter was the foundation and fields were a feature. Physics says the opposite. And even fields are not substances. They are assignments of values, rules that tell you what interactions are allowed at each point in space-time. They are not made of anything. They do not sit somewhere. They describe how the universe behaves. Every time you try to grab matter and hold onto it as a thing, it dissolves into description. This is not because we lack knowledge. It is because the category is wrong. Matter is not what the universe is made of. Matter is how certain constraints show up when conditions allow stable patterns. That sentence is doing a lot of work. Read it again, slowly. Matter is a pattern that persists because the rules permit it. This is why particles can be created and destroyed, why matter can turn into radiation and radiation into matter, why mass and energy are interchangeable. There is no underlying substance being preserved. Only the accounting stays consistent. If matter were a thing, you could not annihilate it into light. If it were a substance, it would have to go somewhere. Instead, the pattern changes. The universe does not care about matter. It cares about consistency. This is why Feynman was always careful when talking about what things are. He knew how easily language tricks you into thinking you've explained something when you've only renamed it. Calling matter energy, or vibrations, or condensed fields, does not solve the problem. It just replaces one comforting word with another. The hard truth is simpler. Matter is not fundamental. It is not solid. It is not persistent in the way you imagine. It is a temporary arrangement of interactions in a structure that does not need matter to exist. Now think about how radical that is. The universe does not require matter to be real. Matter requires the universe to behave a certain way. That inversion is the mystery Feynman was pointing at. You were taught that matter is the mystery, and physics is trying to explain it. In reality, matter is the easy part. The mystery is why the rules allow matter at all. And that question does not have a satisfying, object-shaped answer. What you call matter is what happens when fields interact in stable, repeating ways. When those patterns persist long enough, you give them names: electrons, protons, atoms, molecules, bodies. None of those are things in the old sense. They are behaviors that don't change quickly. Once you accept that, the phrase made of matter stops making sense. Nothing is made of matter. Matter is made by the structure of reality, and that is where everything you were taught quietly falls apart. If matter is not a thing, then the idea that it exists in the way you were taught starts to wobble. You were trained to think of existence as occupancy. If something takes up space and lasts through time, it exists. If it doesn't, it's abstract. Physics does not agree. At the level where matter actually behaves the way our equations say it does, there is no little object sitting somewhere enduring from moment to moment. There are interactions, transitions, probabilities that update according to rules. Between interactions, there is no guarantee that anything definite exists at all. This is not philosophical speculation. This is how the predictions work. An electron does not carry a tiny identity card that says, I am here. It carries a set of rules for how it can interact if something tries to measure it. Until that interaction occurs, asking where it is may have no answer. Matter, in that sense, is conditional. It exists. When interactions make it exist, that should feel deeply unsettling, because it undermines the idea that the universe is built out of persistent objects. It isn't. It is built out of events. You experience matter as stable because the events that define it repeat rapidly and reliably. A table feels like a thing because the interactions that keep it intact happen unimaginably fast and overwhelmingly consistently. Stability is not substance. It is repetition under constraints. Now look at how this reframes mass, because mass is usually treated as the defining property of matter. Heavy things feel more real, more solid, more there. Mass, too, dissolves under scrutiny. Mass is not a measure of how much stuff something contains. It is a measure of how a pattern responds to forces and how it curves space-time. That's it. Two particles can have the same mass and be completely different. A particle can gain mass, lose mass, convert into energy, or emerge from energy with mass. Nothing is being added or removed in the way you imagine. Mass is not substance. It is behavior in a field. This is why calling matter frozen energy never really worked. Energy is not a thing either. Freezing nothing does not give you something. Matter is not condensed energy. It is a stable configuration allowed by the same constraints that conserve energy. Once again, the universe refuses to give you a material foundation. Now push this one step further. If matter is not fundamental, then the distinction between matter and empty space collapses. Empty space is not the absence of matter in the way you were taught. It is the baseline state of the same fields that produce matter when excited. Matter is what happens when the vacuum is disturbed in specific, repeating ways. That means the difference between something and nothing is not a sharp boundary. It is a matter of activity, not existence. Empty space exists. Matter is something space does. This is the inversion that breaks most intuitions. You thought space was a container and matter was the content. Physics says space and matter are aspects of the same underlying structure. You cannot fully separate them. This is why particles pop into existence in high-energy collisions, why black holes can evaporate, why the early universe could create matter from radiation. There is no warehouse of stuff being filled or emptied. There are only rules being followed. Matter is allowed, not stored. This also explains why matter is fragile in ways people don't expect. You can destroy it, annihilate it, convert it entirely into radiation. If matter were a substance, this would be impossible. Substances don't just vanish into light. Patterns do. This is why the language you were taught keeps failing. It was built for furniture, not fields. For objects, not invariance. For survival, not consistency. Physics is not saying matter is unreal. It is saying your idea of what real means was too small. Matter is real in the only sense that matters. It affects outcomes. It leaves records. It participates in interactions. But it is not real in the sense of being a fundamental ingredient. Reality does not bottom out in matter. It bottoms out in rules. Rules that tell patterns how they may persist. Rules that decide which disturbances last and which fade. Rules that make atoms possible and stars temporary. This is why asking, what is matter really made of, keeps leading nowhere. Matter is not made of something deeper. It is what deeper structure looks like when viewed at the right scale. And now the final discomfort begins to appear. If matter is not fundamental, then neither are the things you identify with. Your body, your brain, your sense of self. These are not piles of stuff. They are arrangements that persist because the universe allows them to. That does not make them less real. It makes them more precise. You are not a thing inside the universe. You are a process the universe permits. That is not poetry. It is literal. The same rules that let electrons form atoms let atoms form molecules. The same rules that let molecules form cells let cells form nervous systems. If matter is a pattern rather than a substance, then reality is no longer built out of objects. It is built out of events, and the actual rules that relate them. That sounds abstract, until you notice that physics has been telling you this for a long time. Every experiment you've ever seen ends the same way, not with a thing, but with a result, a click in a detector, a flash on a screen, a number written down. Physics never hands you matter itself. It hands you records of interactions. Matter only appears in the story you tell afterward. This is why modern physics describes the universe as a network of interactions rather than a collection of objects. Objects are convenient summaries. Interactions are what actually happen. You never observe an electron. You observe what happens when something interacts with an electron. That distinction is not philosophical. It is operational. Once you accept it, the idea that matter sits there passively existing starts to feel outdated. Matter is always doing something, or being ready to do something. If nothing can interact with it, it may as well not exist at all. Existence at this level is participation. Now consider how deeply this undercuts the old picture. You imagined matter as something that remains the same while things happen to it. Physics shows you that matter is defined by what happens to it. Remove interactions, and matter loses all meaning. This is why quantum field theory does not begin with particles. It begins with spots, fields, and symmetries. Particles are what appear when those fields interact in discrete, stable ways. They are outcomes, not ingredients. Matter is what the universe does when its rules intersect. That's the solution Feynman kept circling without ever turning it into a slogan. Matter was never the mystery substance people thought it was. It was a bookkeeping category for stable behavior. The real mystery is why the rules allow stability at all. Why do some patterns persist? Why don't all disturbances immediately dissolve? Why can the universe support atoms? Chemistry, stars, and life, instead of nothing but chaos? Physics does not answer these with because matter exists. Matter is the result, not the reason. The reason lies in symmetry and constraint. Certain configurations are allowed to reinforce themselves. Others are not. That's it. There is no hidden glue holding matter together. There is no deep layer of stuff underneath it. There is only a structure that refuses to contradict itself. Once you see this, the phrase made of matter becomes misleading. Nothing is made of matter in the fundamental sense. Matter is made of permission. That permission is fragile. Change the rules slightly, and atoms fail to form. Chemistry collapses. Stars never ignite. Matter as you know it never appears. The universe could have been one where matter was impossible. The fact that it isn't tells you that matter is not inevitable. It is contingent. That contingency is the real mystery. And now comes the final shift. If matter is not fundamental, then neither is emptiness. Empty space is not the absence of matter in the way you were taught. It is the baseline state of the same fields that give rise to matter when excited. Matter and vacuum are not opposites. They are variations of the causalis same structure. This is why you cannot draw a clean line between something and nothing. There is no sharp boundary where existence turns off. There are only regions where activity is higher or lower. The universe is not divided into objects and gaps. It is continuous. This is why matter can appear from energy and disappear into radiation. Why particles pop in and out of existence in quantum processes. Why the vacuum itself is active. Once you accept that, the old materialist picture finally collapses. Reality is not made of matter. Reality is not made of empty space. Reality is made of just rules that allow both. That is the solution to the mystery. Not a new particle, not a deeper substance. A correction to the category error you were taught at the beginning. You were taught to think that explaining matter meant finding smaller bits of matter. Physics shows you that explanation means abandoning the idea of bits entirely. Matter is not the bedrock of reality. It is one of its most successful illusions. Not because it's false, but because it's emergent. And once you see that, you stop asking what matter is made of, and start asking a better question. What kind of universe allows matter to appear at all? At the end of this trail, there is a temptation to feel cheated. If matter is not the substance of reality, if it dissolves into patterns and permissions and rules, then it can feel like something solid has been taken away, as if physics promised an answer and delivered abstraction instead. That feeling comes from expecting reality to end in an object. It never was going to. The universe does not bottom out in a thing you can imagine holding in your hand. It bottoms out in consistency, in the fact that certain behaviors cannot contradict each other, no matter how you look. Matter survives in that universe not because it is fundamental, but because it is stable. Stability is the real miracle. Atoms persist because the rules allow bound states. Molecules persist because certain arrangements lower energy. Solids persist because interactions resist change. None of this requires matter to be a substance. It requires the structure to permit repetition. Matter is what repetition looks like, when it happens long enough for you to name it. That is why matter feels so convincing. It doesn't flicker in and out of existence at human timescales. It behaves, it holds shape, it resists, it leaves marks, but all of that is behavior, not essence. You were taught to confuse the two. Once you stop doing that, a strange clarity appears. The universe no longer feels like it's hiding its true nature behind layers of stuff. It feels like it has been telling you the same thing over and over, and you just weren't listening. Nothing is solid in the way you thought. Nothing is persistent in the way you imagined. Nothing exists independently of the rules that allow it to exist. And that is not a failure of reality. It is its defining feature. Matter is real because it participates. It is not real because it exists by itself. This is why physics never finds a final particle that everything else is made of. No matter how far you go, the question, what is it made of, eventually stops applying. You reach a level where description replaces composition. The universe is not built. It is constrained, and matter is one of the most impressive outcomes of those constraints. Feynman understood this intuitively, even when he didn't phrase it this way. He knew that the mystery was not what matter is, but why people insist on treating it like a substance long after physics stopped supporting that idea. The solution was never a new discovery. It was letting go of the wrong question. Matter is not the answer. Matter is the phenomenon. Once you accept that, a lot of other confusions dissolve with it. The boundary between matter and energy softens. The line between object and process blurs. The sharp division between something and nothing fades. Reality stops being a pile of things and starts being a web of lawful relationships. And here's the final, quiet truth that usually goes unspoken. You were taught wrong about matter because you were taught what was useful there, not what was accurate. At human scale, matter behaves like stuff, so we call it stuff. That works until it doesn't. Physics is what happens when you push past usefulness and demand consistency. Consistency does not care about intuition. It does not care about comfort. It does not care about pictures. It cares only that the universe does not contradict itself. Matter exists because the universe allows it. It persists because the rules reinforce it. It disappears when the rules permit change. There is no deeper layer of material underneath that. Once you see this, the universe stops feeling mysterious in the old way. There is no hidden substance to uncover. There is no final ingredient waiting to be named. There is only a structure that holds and patterns that appear within it when conditions are right. Matter is one of those patterns, a powerful one, a convincing one, but not a fundamental one. And the moment you stop asking matter to be more than that, the mystery it was supposed to solve finally resolves, not into an object, but into understanding.